In a life filled with temptations, I made a choice that not only shattered my family, but left a scar I would carry for the rest of my life. I, Gracie, a wife and mother, plunged myself into a whirlwind of adultery and deceit, a decision I must live with forever. But my story is not just one of betrayal. It's also a journey towards seeking forgiveness and finding hope in darkness. Now I'm going to tell you my story.
My name is Gracie, and our daughter goes by Margaret, although she prefers to be called Margot. It's clear that she takes after her father, as we don't have the best relationship. I believe it's because both she and I have a tendency to be manipulative. Throughout our marriage, I have occasionally been unfaithful to my husband. It's a struggle for me, as I have a sex addiction, and Jack doesn't quite meet my needs in the bedroom. However, that wasn't the reason I married him. I was drawn to him because he was easy to control and he had a good income. I understand if this seems callous to you, but I live a luxurious lifestyle with a Mercedes S-Series and a grand mansion. If you've chosen a more settled life or haven't planned for the future, please refrain from judging me. Jack has never cheated on me. He used to be like a devoted puppy, always following me around. I taught him everything he knows about intimacy, although I convinced him that I learned it all from the internet. While he may not match my level of expertise, he has come close thanks to my guidance. This is perhaps why I feel so devastated about the possibility of our divorce. You see, everyone eventually gets caught. In my case, it happened while I was engaging in a passionate encounter with a passionate individual from the Dominican Republic. Meanwhile, my daughter decided to skip school and record our encounter in high definition using the phone I had bought her. It's truly horrifying to realize the kind of person I have raised. In hindsight, I should have made a different choice. However, she was the one who brought Jack and me together in our youth, despite our doubts. Unfortunately, hindsight is never helpful when you need it most. When I returned home that day, I caught a glimpse of her smirking at me before she hurried upstairs. That's when I entered the living room and was confronted with a nightmare. My most recent sexual escapade was being broadcasted on the television. Jack sat there, tears streaming down his face, emitting a high-pitched sound from his chest. My husband was slowly unraveling right before my eyes. I was paralyzed. My mind urged me to flee and unplug the television, but my body was in shock. We both watched as I engaged in passionate intercourse with a young student. In an ideal world, even at that moment, my husband would have been aroused. Then perhaps we can reach an understanding. However, it was not meant to be. He abruptly stood up and hurled the remote at our highly expensive UHD flat-screen TV. His head swiftly turned towards me, his eyes locking with mine, filled with nothing but intense anger and hatred. I cannot precisely say what it is, Jack. I can attempt to explain, yes, it was either an accident or perhaps God's will, right? I thought I understood the complexities between men and women, how it seldom works out. Yet foolishly, I persisted in trying. His hands clenched and unclenched, his breathing erratic. For the first time since I met him, I genuinely felt afraid that he might harm me. Strangely, it seemed as though he wasn't surprised by my affair, but I didn't have the time to dwell on it. Instead, he rushed into the garage, and I heard the familiar rumble of his old truck starting. He always joked that it gave him a sense of farm credit when he tended to his animal patients. Even after he stopped practicing as a veterinarian, he held onto that silly pickup truck. Immediately after, I heard the automatic garage door begin to open, and before I could reach the driveway, he pulled out onto the street. Please, God, let him buckle up. I heard my monster. My own flesh and blood also stood on the staircase, gazing out of the expansive window. Why do you even care? You caused this, I yelled. What do you mean I caused this? My soon-to-be ex-mother. I didn't have an affair with a man while I was married to a man young enough to be my boyfriend. You are incredibly naive. What a monstrous creature I have raised. I needed her to leave. I began devising a plan to save my own life. And the first step was to send the prudish girl to her grandparents. Of course, I would first confiscate her phone and destroy the DVD she burned so her father could watch it. You will be visiting your grandparents. I strongly advise against mentioning any of this to them. You no longer have any evidence, and I can certainly make your life exceedingly difficult while you reside under this roof. You're mistaken if you believe I won't regain control over your father once he calms down. So, don't underestimate me. I screamed in frustration, assuming she had fled upstairs in fear, unaware of the surveillance capabilities of cloud-based computers. A day elapsed, during which I believed my daughter was safely hidden away from any potential harm. Finally, my husband returned home, his eyes bloodshot and his demeanor indicating sleepless nights. I rubbed my eyes vigorously, making no effort to change out of my disheveled attire. As he entered the living room, I attempted to convey my distress, feigning a state of utter despair. In the voice of a remorseful child, I pleaded, "Please forgive me." Claiming to have experienced a nervous breakdown, I admitted to allowing regrettable actions to transpire. His gaze remained cold, imbued with unfathomable emotions despite the evident pain. Slowly rising to my feet, I reached out to embrace him, only to find my gesture met with stoic resistance. He stood motionless, akin to a steadfast post or unyielding tree. Acknowledging my failure to him, to our relationship, and to our daughter, I professed my love amidst tears, expressing willingness to accept any consequence, even if it meant him leaving me. I took a calculated risk, unsure of its outcome but feeling the odds were in my favor. Finally, he spoke, requesting that I cease my attempts to physically comfort him as he needed time to think, expressing exhaustion and the need for solitude in the bedroom with the door locked. Grateful that he didn't succumb to the prospect of divorce, I retreated to gather my belongings from the master bedroom and relocate to the spare room down the hall. Returning to the locked door, I lightly knocked, imploring him to engage in conversation. His response was a promise to talk in the morning. Now came the most challenging task. Appearing even more distressed, I refrained from consuming water or food. I further disheveled my hair and induced vomiting to stain my sundress, adding carefully applied snot for effect. Additionally, I placed a glass of vodka nearby and applied Vaseline to the back of my hand. Throughout the remainder of the day and night, I forced myself to remain awake, augmenting the appearance of fatigue. As Jack descended the following morning, I hastily applied Vaseline to my teeth to maintain a strained smile and splashed vodka in my eyes to induce redness and tears, despite the intense discomfort it caused. Observing Jack's improved demeanor tempered by devastation, I noted his evident concern regarding my appearance, interpreting it as a glimmer of hope for our relationship. His remark expressing concern about my well-being as he carried me to bed elicited tears of relief. His subsequent admission of the depth of his hurt and consideration of offering another chance, contingent upon counseling for my issues, marked a potential path to reconciliation. However, his unexpected ultimatum, wherein he vowed to inflict upon me the same anguish I caused him by engaging in infidelity and filming the act for my viewing, left me genuinely shocked. It became apparent that my actions had unwittingly transformed my once loving husband into a vengeful figure determined to exact retribution. The mere idea of him replicating my actions with other women was almost unbearable. However, I required his presence in my life. I had to endure this in order to restore my life to its former state, and eventually seek my revenge. In the meantime, if we were to become intimate again, I would take precautions by using a condom. Due to my trust issues, I cannot risk the possibility of having another child, which could potentially bind me to him even further. I comprehend, Jack, my beloved. I do not wish to experience the same pain, but I am willing to endure this for the sake of keeping you. I am prepared to face any challenge for our relationship. Initially, I found it somewhat foolish, but one must do what is necessary. Over the following months, we settled into a demanding routine. My troublesome child returned home, perplexed as to why we hadn't divorced. I simply smiled at her and reminded her that I am the one in charge of this family. After that, she no longer directly challenged me. Attending counseling was a breeze. I simply attributed my addiction to sex as the cause. The therapist accepted it without question and regurgitated it to my husband as if he were an infant. However, the issue was that my husband, as I mentioned earlier, was attempting to engage in intercourse in a foolish manner. He had taken control of the bedroom, leaving me powerless. Each time we were intimate, I couldn't help but wonder if he had acquired his newfound passionate techniques from another woman. When he claimed to be sick or tired and we didn't engage in sexual activity, I grew anxious. Was it possible that tomorrow I would witness him engaging in affectionate acts with a young girl, potentially falling in love with her? The cumulative impact was devastating. As the year progressed, I lost all sense of self-confidence. I couldn't risk engaging in an extramarital affair that could be discovered by my husband, so I relied solely on him. I felt despondent when he didn't pay attention to me. I began losing weight, despite not being overweight to begin with. Even my hair lost its luster and became fragile. My colleagues at work commented that I appeared as though I had experienced a traumatic event and had aged 10 years. Sleep eluded me and my joints ached. Perhaps I was prematurely aging. The most distressing aspect is that I became fixated on my husband and, dare I say it, genuinely fell in love with him. He held all the power. Each day, I anticipated my world being snatched away from me, and like a malevolent priest in a film, my Jack would gleefully chuckle and delve into my chest to wrench out my still-beating heart. My plan was disastrous. Who would have imagined that the main schemer would fall into the very trap she had set? Finally, nearly a year later, I can no longer bear it. I made the decision to take action and observe the outcome. I sent my daughter back to her grandparents and resolved to confront the issues with my beloved husband. He needed to make a choice, or I would leave. Despite my newfound love for him, I cannot endure any longer, Jack. I cannot tolerate it any further. I need you to hasten and find this other woman, engage in intimacy with her, and allow me to witness it on tape so that we may overcome this. He simply stared at me. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized that this gaze mirrored the one he had given me a year ago, the gaze of an insect collector. When he spots a particularly intriguing insect, he desires to capture it. Or perhaps the feverish gaze of a young sociopath burning ants with a magnifying glass. What have I done with my actions? Do you truly believe I can stoop to your level, Gracie? He uttered in a chilling tone. I noticed that he used my full name, something he never did, as he preferred the nickname Grace. I never intended to carry out what I disclosed to you. All I did this year was push you. I wanted you to finally love me so that when you could no longer bear the worries and doubts, you would issue me an ultimatum. He rose from his seat and walked into his office. I don't care. We have come full circle, you and I. I no longer care about you in the slightest, and you seem to love me. I wouldn't care. While you struggle to fathom me seeking revenge by sleeping with another woman, you now experience what I felt before. I contemplated the documents handed to me, divorce papers that had been signed and dated almost a year ago. My vision blurred with tears, but in that moment, the specifics didn't really matter. There was a single opportunity, Gracie won. If only you had come clean during this time, acknowledged everything, and genuinely apologized instead of trying to pass it off as some sort of mental issue. We could have found peace, but you chose not to. You evaded and attempted to escape just as I had suspected. I am not naive, Gracie. I had harbored suspicions for quite some time, and I am certain that this affair was not your first. I let it slide because of our daughter and because I loved you back then, but now it's over. If you wish, sign the papers, but regardless, gather your belongings and leave. Margot will stay with me. She is old enough to make her own decision. That means I will be the one running the household until she completes her education. You earn more money than I do, so good luck seeking alimony. Margot will be home soon, and I do not want you here. I felt like Frankenstein, observing the monster I'd created. I doubted that I would succumb to pneumonia anytime soon, but internally, I was as lifeless as Mary Shelley's creation. He had orchestrated it all. I even questioned if his suspicions and plans had begun around the time he decided to pursue a career as a truck driver. This shift had undoubtedly altered the financial dynamics between us and diminished my chances of using alimony as a means to prolong the divorce. He was also correct in stating that our daughter was of an age where her preference would hold weight in custody matters. In truth, the agreement was more than fair, considering he earned less and would likely become the primary custodian. I could potentially be obligated to pay him child support. I could contest the entire situation, dragging it out for months or even years. However, the exorbitant financial burden of employing a lawyer for such an extended period of time renders it imprudent. Given the limited alternatives available to me, I reluctantly affixed my signature to the documents on the spot, hastily packing a few belongings before departing. The remaining items can be collected by the movers, as they are merely material possessions. Regrettably, what I truly desire is no longer within my grasp. One would have hoped that this would mark the conclusion of my woeful tale. Alas, my daughter made it abundantly clear that she harbored no fear towards me and expressed her vehement desire to never lay eyes upon me again. To compound my misery, my embarrassing actions were uploaded from the cloud onto the MILF website. The repercussions of my amateur videos were swift, surpassing even the speed at which the lawsuit resulted in their removal. Consequently, I lost my job as a veterinarian and was compelled to seek employment in another state, where I would have to account for my abrupt termination. Someday, I am confident that I will overcome the anguish, the tormenting sensation, as if I were being torn apart. Despite not being able to forget Jack, I still possess enough allure to find a replacement. However, I am uncertain of the advantages it would bring. I have experienced a previous marriage where I entered into it without wholeheartedly loving my spouse, and the outcome speaks for itself. I am certainly not as resilient as Jack. He granted me an entire year to act with honesty and rectitude, with the possibility of accepting me once more. Yet, I failed to seize the opportunity. As for my current romantic life, I engage in casual relationships, but I am emotionally detached and lifeless. Deep down, I still hold affection for the monsters I have created. Subscribe to our channel to ensure that your second half remains faithful, and go ahead and listen to the next story, for it surpasses the magnitude of this one. If you are under the age of 18, do not even contemplate listening to